All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for your patience as we got our technical issues sorted out here today. But thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Reva Ramadurai. I'm the director of the Thermo Fisher Scientific Junior Innovators Challenge, and I'm here with my colleague Alex Grace. And we're so glad that you could join us for today's webinar. Alex and I run the Thermo Fisher JIC competition, and you've probably already received some emails from us since earning your nomination. And we'll continue to send reminders, updates, and helpful resources throughout the application process. We want you to remember that you're here because you competed at your local science fair and you earned the right to compete at the Thermo Fisher JIC. You earned a nomination, which means you're among the top 10% of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students across the United States, which is a huge honor. And this is really no small feat. So today we're going to talk more about what that nomination means and share our advice for getting started on the application process.
We know the application might seem like a lot of work, but we're going to show you some tips for how to tackle it in an easy way. Remember, you've already done the hard work by doing a research project, so you got this. You might even find that filling out the application is a really fun process, and just by submitting one, you have the chance to win prizes. If you have questions today, feel free to type them in the live chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll answer questions at the end, and you can always email us at jic@societyforscience.org at any time. As a reminder, we're here to help you. There's no such thing as a dumb question. We are not the judges, and so you don't have to worry about impressing us. This session is being recorded and will be on our YouTube page, so you can look back on it, and other students who cannot join us today can also hear this information.
So Alex is going to start sharing screen so we can start our presentation. And I'm going to kick us off by talking a little bit about the Thermo Fisher JIC. So Thermo Fisher JIC is a program of the Society for Science, which is the organization that Alex and I work for. The Society is a nonprofit dedicated to expanding scientific literacy, effective STEM education and scientific research. The Society's vision is to promote the understanding and appreciation of science and the vital role it plays in human advancement, to inform, educate, and inspire. We do this by hosting science competitions and publishing science news, an award-winning flagship magazine with the most important science news from all fields and applications of science and technology, and also Science News Explorers, which is the Society's award-winning publication dedicated to students, parents, and teachers, used by nearly 4 million visitors a year. And in addition to the Thermo Fisher JIC, you might be familiar with our 2 high school competitions, the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair, which is the world's largest international high school science competition, and the Regeneron Science Talent Search, which is the nation's oldest and most prestigious STEM competition for high school seniors.
Thermo Fisher JIC is made possible by our friends and sponsor, Thermo Fisher Scientific. Thermo Fisher is committed to nurturing generations of STEM professionals that more fully reflect our society and embrace their diverse perspectives and ideas to fuel innovation, advance science, and solve the world's most complex problems. Now, let's talk about the competition. Thermo Fisher JIC is the premier national STEM research competition for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. The first part of the competition consists of a written application, where you will tell us all about your research project. In the application, you'll be asked to describe your hobbies and interests and respond to a few creative essays as well. Judges then review all this information and ultimately select the 30 finalists and top 300 scholars and that participate in the second part of the competition. And the 30 finalists come to Washington, D.C. for finals week. You'll learn more about that in just a bit. All right, so here, how will you become a Thermo Fisher JIC finalist?
All right, so the first thing that you have to do in order to be considered for the Thermo Fisher JIC is to complete our science and engineering project. So chances are you've already completed that step, so yay, check that off. You must then enter your project into a society-affiliated science fair. You can find affiliated science fairs near you by going to the Society's website. We have a Find a Fair page. Again, chances are you've already completed that step as well, and that's why you're here as a nominee. The top 10% of students 6th through 8th grade at those fairs receive a nomination to apply to the competition. The next big step is to complete the application by the deadline, which this year is June 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So if you've not already opened an application, you could do so by going to our application website, thermofisherjic.smapply.org. We're going to put a few helpful links for you all at the end of the webinar, but you should also have that in email. And then once you've applied, you're in the running to become one of the top 300 junior innovators. Those top 300 junior innovators are going to be announced in early September. From there, the judges select the 30 finalists, and those 30 finalists are announced in mid-September this year. They are invited to compete in finals week of the competition, which is here in Washington, D.C. And during finals week, finalists will showcase your research projects. You'll compete in hands-on team challenges and experience a whole lot of other unique opportunities. We'll talk about finals week a little bit more in just a few minutes.
What does it mean to be a nominee? So, being nominated to apply for the Thermo Fisher JIC is an honor in and of itself. Being a nominee means that you participated in a society-affiliated science fair and were selected as one of the top 10%. The fairs receive a suggested rubric for judging projects and selecting nominees, and you made the cut, so congratulations. As a nominee, your fair should have sent you a certificate and a digital packet full of information about the program and how to apply. In it, you will find the official rules, parent permission form, nominee packet, and materials checklist. If you did not receive this, please email us at jic@societyforscience.org and we'll send you the link.
All right, so the next stage in the competition is the entrant level. So like we mentioned earlier, the deadline for the application this year is June 11th. So once you complete and submit your application by that deadline, you are considered an entrant of the Thermo Fisher JIC. So the application, if you haven't already taken a look at it, consists of a few different parts. It asks you to talk about your project. It asks about your interests. It has some essay questions to kind of get you talking about your critical thinking skills. And it might seem a little bit overwhelming, but we have a lot of resources to help you, one of which is this webinar. So if you've already tuned into this, that's a great first step. So can pat yourself on the back for taking that initiative. And you will see on our YouTube page that we have a lot of webinars and resources for you that you can check out as well. Submitting your application is a huge step. We know that the application does require some work and some time, and you're sharing your awesome research projects that you've worked so hard to accomplish with us and with the judges, more importantly. So to award you for that, all entrants receive a free t-shirt and are automatically also entered to win additional prizes in a lottery system once the application is closed. So you can win prizes like Kindles. And then another great perk of becoming an entrant is that you join our alumni network. So our alumni are across all of our competitions. And so this is a great way for you to meet other students with similar interests, meet older alumni that have been in your shoes and have competed in our research, in our competitions and gone on to do more research and more with their academic studies. And there are other opportunities like webinars and other meetups that will be available to you once you are in our alumni network. So definitely something to look forward to.
Our top 300 junior innovators are selected by our evaluators and announced on September 3rd of this year. Both top 300 and their teachers win awards. The top 300 junior innovators win a special prize package, including a $125 cash prize, courtesy of our partnership with DoD STEM, a subscription to Science News, and a subscription to Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. Teachers receive a 1-year subscription to Science News Explorers as well.
All right, so now a little bit more about what it means to become a finalist. So like I mentioned, the finalists will be announced on September 17th this year. And finals week is going to be from October 24th through 29th. Um, so during finals week, you're going to not only present your research, but you're actually going to be mostly judged on team challenges. So we'll put all 30 finalists into 6 teams of 5. And together with your teammates, you're going to do a variety of hands-on STEM activities. Most all finalists, I think, say that by the end of it, they don't really feel like they're being judged. They feel like they're just getting a really great experience with hands-on STEM. So they're really fun, though it might seem kind of daunting at first to do things that you might not have a lot of experience in, but that's intentional. The judges want to see how you work on, you know, solving problems that you might not have a lot of experience in. So not only do you obviously compete in the judging part of finals week, but finals week has other great activities. Students meet alumni. We take our finalists around DC just to, experience the city, do things like monument tours. And ultimately, finals week is a really great bonding experience to meet 29 other like-minded students who are just as excited about STEM and scientific research as you are. So hopefully that encourages you to kind of make it to that level, or really just put your foot in the door by completing that application, right? More prizes include iPads and STEM summer camps, tons of swag. Each finalist receives $500 and their school receives $1,000 for STEM initiatives, which is great. And of course, we have the top prize of $25,000, which is the Thermo Fisher Scientific Ascend Award. I also want to mention that the Thermo Fisher JIC is completely free to students. So there is no cost to submit your application. If you're selected as a finalist, all expenses are paid for you and a parent or guardian to come travel to Washington, D.C. So all travel, all accommodations, all food are completely covered. So if you want to know more about Finals Week and how judging works, I recommend that you check out our introductory webinar from either 2024 or 2023. We have a lot of great resources, like I mentioned earlier. And you can also watch our highlights video from 2024, which is, shows you exactly what you'll experience during Finals Week.
Now we're going to share our advice for getting started with your application. All right, so number 1, read the official rules. Our first tip is here to help you set yourself up for success. You must read through the official rules before you start your application. You can find the PDF on the homepage and resource pages of the application and on the Society's website. If you've already started or submitted your application, you can still go back and read through the rules now. The official rules go over eligibility requirements, what you must submit in order to complete your application, the ethics statement, team projects, visual aid guidelines, and science fair paperwork. It has a lot of information, so it's really important that you read through it, and you can always email us if you have questions. This year, we've made some changes to visual aid guidelines from last year and are asking you to cite your images. All images. This includes graphs, charts, pictures, etc. They must be credited, even if you made them. Crediting sources is an important part of scientific research, so this will give you good practice for the future. The guidelines have some directions on how to do so, but if you have any questions, you can always email us.
All right. Excuse me. Our next tip on getting started on your application is to open it early. So although the application deadline isn't until June 11th, we highly recommend starting your application as soon as you've received your nomination. This way, the details of your project will be fresh, and your motivation will still be really high. You're coming off of that high of competing at your science fair and earning that nomination. So we really recommend getting started as soon as you know that you're nominated. The number one thing that you can do to start is to register for an account and enter your fair password so that you gain full access to the application. If you don't know your fair password, this is something that your fair should have sent to you, should have emailed to you along with the nomination materials. Or if you entered the fair password incorrectly, you can email us and we'll help you out. So we just need your name, the name of the fair that nominated you, and the city and state where your fair took place, and we can find your password for you. We'll keep emailing your parents or guardians and your teachers throughout the spring, from the time you earn your nomination until you submit, with a lot of encouraging messages. So, just try. You never know what will happen just by submitting your application. It means that you have a chance to be named a top 300 junior innovator or a finalist. And then another tip that that I'll mention is that you can still edit your application even after you submit it. So if you just click on a task, once you open your application, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about here. You'll select edit. And after you finished making your edits, reopening the form, just hit mark as complete. It's a green button at the bottom of every task. Your answers will be saved. And that way, you can always submit your application even before you've finished all the fine tweaking, but submitting it means that you know that we have it and you know that you're automatically done. You're going to be an entrant. You've completed the application. So we definitely recommend once you're like 95% of the way there, go ahead and submit. You can always make more tweaks until the deadline.
Our next piece of advice is to create a plan for completing the application. You can use this planner, which we provided in the digital nominee packet. Make sure to email us if you did not receive the link from your fair. You can fill it out in the PDF online or print it out. We hope this helps you manage your time and enables you to complete the application before the deadline. You have worked so hard, and you should reward yourself each step of the way. Whether it's by listening to your favorite song, doing an activity you love, or enjoying a special treat, we hope you make time to celebrate the small wins throughout the application.
All right, I'm going to pause for a second and make sure folks know that you can ask us questions, any questions that you have at all via the chat function. So whenever something comes to mind, feel free to pop it in there. Alex and I are going to take some questions at the very end once we're done with the presentation. So yeah, feel free to use that chat to ask us your questions. This next tip or piece of advice, I've mentioned it before, but it's one of the many resources that we have available on our YouTube page and in the application itself, but watch the walkthrough videos. We know that there are many parts to the application, each asking for different things, and you may not know exactly what we're asking for in each of these tasks. But that's why we have tons of resources to help you. We've created videos to walk you through each section of the application. And in your application, these are located in the resources tab, which is in the top right corner. Know that you can also always email us with any questions that you might have. The YouTube page also has our past webinars. I like to always point out our alumni advice videos, especially if you're looking for some motivation and inspiration. It always helps to hear it directly from students that have been in your shoes that it's really worth applying. You will see that many of our alumni feel just as unsure about, how far they'd go as you might feel now. But again, you'll never know if you don't try. So take a look at those alumni videos. We'll also be doing at least one new alumni webinar coming up later this spring, which we will send an email about in just a couple weeks. You can also read blogs about our alumni and their experiences as finalists by visiting the Society's website. So if you go to our main homepage and click on Press Room and then blogs, you can use a search bar to find all of the relevant blogs to our middle school alumni. And just as a note, you might see that the competition was formally named the Broadcom Masters. So most of our blogs will refer to it by this name and have that name in the title. All right. The next piece of advice that we have is an important one. It is about getting your science fair paperwork together. So before it gets too late after your science fair, you want to make sure that you get together all of the paperwork you submitted at your local fair. So this is a really important step of the application because it helps us know that you are safe when you did your project. So we ask that you submit any paperwork you completed for your fair. We ask you to describe what safety measures you followed, who gave you approvals to do your project, and a little bit more. So again, you can submit the same forms you gave to us in your you gave to your science fair. If your project was a continuation from last year, there will be a continuation form that you're asked to complete. And this just tells us a little bit, tells the judges a little bit about what was different from your previous year's project or 2 years ago project compared to what you're doing now. If you don't have any of these forms, have your teacher or parent or guardian or fair director, basically the adult that looked over your project and gave you the okay to do it, write a letter. You can then upload that letter into the scientific paperwork section of the application. It'll walk you through exactly how to do that. And ultimately, we just want to make sure that you are safe while you are conducting your research project. So again, highly recommend if you completed paperwork and you know that now, remember to get copies from your science fair. If you've already completed it, make sure you go back and ask them before it gets too close to the deadline. If you have not completed yet, make sure you make copies for yourself so that this step is an easy check for you once you get to it in the application. The official paperwork is always the best, but remember that you have that letter as your second option. And you might come across this question when you start looking at part 6 of the application. We accept Regeneron ISA forms or whatever equivalent forms that you might have used at your fair. So you'll see that we link to the Regeneron ISA forms in the application itself. If your form doesn't look exactly like that, that's perfectly fine. We just want whatever you submitted to your local fair. And again, this just helps us make sure that you were safe while you conducted your research, and that paperwork helps us verify it.
Great. Last tip for completing your application is to tackle it in parts. It's a big application, it's a long application. And so once you're familiar with all of the parts of the application, you should tackle it in small pieces. The application may seem long at first, but you can always save your work and pick up where you left off. Try completing part 1, registration, part 2, student experience, and part 5, personal interests first. These sections ask for basic information about yourself, your school experience, your hobbies, and extracurricular activities. You can easily knock those out of the way, and you can also easily knock out the permission form upload. Once you've completed these sections, you're already halfway done with all of the tasks. So now we're going to go over a couple tips for submitting a great application. And so now that we've talked about getting started on your application, here's our recommendations for finishing and submitting a great application. 1, be yourself and make an effort. We ask a lot of questions in the application so the judges can get to know you. Having a teacher or parent or other adult review your work for things like typos is okay, but the application should very much be in your own words. We want to hear from you. You gained a nomination, and that's what the judges want to hear about.
Forgot to unmute. Our next tip here is to give credit where credit is due. So it's totally fine to have received help from a teacher, from a mentor, from your parent or guardian, or another adult, but tell us about it, right? So the application is going to ask specific questions about the help you might have received for your project. It's going to ask you who helped you, if you worked at a lab, how did you get access to your lab? What role did your mentor play in your project, or did whatever adult that was supporting you, what role, they had in supporting your project. And it's really best to answer these questions truthfully. We're not trying to trick you. Even if you had someone help you, your research can be your own and your application will show that. So don't be afraid to just really answer those questions truthfully. Scientific integrity is a really big part of scientific research. And so you want to make sure that you're, not overstating your claims as to what you've done, right? That's a big learning process when you go further on in your academic careers as well. So when you get to those questions in the application, answer them as best as you can.
Next tip is to write clearly and concisely and to stick to the word limit. I recommend writing your responses to the questions in a separate Word document to make sure that you save them. Then you can also check how many words they are, make sure you're meeting all of the requirements, and also make sure that if there's some glitch in the application that you don't lose all of the work that you've done. But also recommend, once you've written your answers, to read them aloud to yourself. Make sure that it makes sense, make sure it feels like you, and that will help you to make sure that you're writing clearly and concisely.
All right. All right. And our last piece of advice here is about the visual aid. So don't cram information into your visual aid. I cannot say that enough. You want to pick the essentials that tell your research story. So it's not about really, first of all, you only have 2 pages to put all your visuals in there. You don't need every inch of white space on those 2 pages to be covered up with images and captions. You really want to pick, what is essential for the evaluators and judges to understand the data you collected, how you collected it, and how you analyzed that data, right? What your findings ultimately show. So remember that, you don't have your project board with you, so this is your opportunity to get those visuals in, whether it's images, figures, charts, or tables. You get to decide what you want to share with the judges. We don't allow pictures of your science fair project board to be published or your research paper. Again, the goal here is to really synthesize that information and put it into these 2 pages. We recommend that you keep your visual aid to no more than 3 images per page. Again, that's a recommendation. It's not a hard rule. But that way, this is just what we've seen to be the best kind of use of the space, right? You want the images to be clearly seen without zooming in. That's just one of the things that we, based on how evaluators and judges look at the application in our system, you're going to want those to be readable at 100%, not being able to really get into tiny, tiny text there. And you also want to make sure that you're not including large chunks of text. Your captions are fine, but this is not a section, this is not a space for you to elaborate on any of your project essays or any of the other essays in the application. This should really just be your figures, the titles, and the captions for those figures. Remember that you can also refer to any images in your visual aid within the application. So for example, if you're writing your methods, you could say, see figure 1 in the visual aid for a diagram of XYZ. And then, make sure you name that figure as figure 1 in your visual aid. We talk about this in one of our application videos as well, so you can always refer back to that for help, but great applications are ones that really choose the best visuals and don't cram a lot of stuff into those 2 pages for sure. All right, so moving on to some frequently asked questions that will also help you put your best foot forward with the application. We often get a lot of questions about team projects and whether applications are submitted separately. The answer is yes. Each member of a team project must work on and submit their own applications. And this is because the application looks at more than just your research project. There are questions about your interests, like I mentioned earlier. There are a few creative essays and personal essays to respond to. So your application should really talk about, your individual strengths and accomplishments to stand out. We understand that your answers in part 3, which is the project essay section, may be similar to your teammates. That's okay, but we do ask that you try to answer those in your own words, so they shouldn't be an exact match to any of your teammates. You can also be in the situation where maybe you would like to apply to the competition, but your teammate might not, or vice versa. That's totally okay too. Not all members of a team have to enter the competition to be eligible to make it further on. Just one or two team members can do that. But a team of can only be up to 3 students. So make sure you're following that rule as well. Another question that we get is, can I add more data to my application? Because oftentimes you might be doing, you might have done your science fair project back in January, and you have all of this time until you're submitting the application in June. The answer is yes, you can add more data to your application, but only if you are not changing anything about your methodology or your project. So that means that you have to use the same methods and the intent of your project has to be the same. You can't be adding anything on that's new, right? So if you're doing an engineering design project, for example, you can test your prototype in the same methods as the project that earned you the nomination. But you can't make any tweaks to that design and then retest and then show that data in your project. The reason for this is, we want to make sure, again, that whatever you're submitting has been reviewed, right, for that safety, and that we have the scientific paperwork to say that, this has been reviewed and approved. Particularly, if you're doing anything that might involve testing with human participants or vertebrate animals, anything with, potentially hazardous biologic agents. All of that work should have been reviewed and approved at your local science fair. So doing anything additional could potentially be a problem. So we want to make sure you're being safe and following the rules that we have in place to ensure that safety. The last question that we often get that I'll cover is, what happens next? I mentioned this earlier, but there's no additional step that you'll need to complete to make it to the top 300 or finalist level once you submit the application. So that application that you submit to us in June is what the evaluators and judges will review to ultimately select those top 300 and 30 finalists. So you're all set. You're off the hook after that June 11th deadline passes. So all you have to do is make it to that finish line, and it is smooth sailing from there. So we know that was a lot, but don't worry, you still have a lot of time to prepare and work on your application. And that's why, again, we recommend that you start early, you submit once you feel good about where you are, and you can always make tweaks until the end. So I see that the chat has been blowing up with some questions. So Alex and I are going to take just a minute to review some of them and start answering. If you haven't had a chance to ask your question yet, go ahead and pop it in the chat now. I'll also say that you can always email us after the webinar is ended if we're not able to take all questions today at jic@societyforscience.org. We're going to put that email up at the end of the webinar too, so that you have it. But let me take a minute and start looking through some questions. All right, we have one here about the title for your project. Can the title for my submission be slightly different from the one I have at the science fair? Yes, it can be different. You don't need to use the same project title. But again, remember that you shouldn't be changing your project from the one that earned you a nomination, right? You need to submit the same project that you submitted at your science fair. So while you can change the title, the intent, the purpose, the main hypothesis variables, all of that for your project should stay the same. I think that answers some of the other questions that I see also around data and incorporating new elements.
We do a brief overview of what the visual aid is.
Yes, we can. Excuse me. Um, So the visual aid, your best resource for this is going to be the official rules. I'll start out by saying that, right? So remember Alex's first tip, you definitely want to read through the rules before you start the application. But that has a really clear kind of outline of what you should be including in the visual aid, and also, the what you can't include in the visual aid. So again, the visual aid should be, it's 2 pages. You're going to submit that as a PDF. We recommend no more than 3 to 4 images on each of those pages. Images, figures, charts, whatever you want to kind of include there, visuals per page on that. And it should really just be showing, all of the kind of images that you would have put on your project board into the application. So talking again about what your data was, really the analysis is a really important part. So if you did any kind of testing, show that there, right? Show any graphs that you might have that support your conclusions and your findings. That's the kind of gist of what the visual aid is. Is there an estimated amount of time that the application should take? That is a great question. The answer is that there is not one single right or wrong answer. I will say that every year we have a lot of students open applications on the day of the deadline and actually do make it to submit it, before the deadline closes. So know that it's possible to do in one day. You might want more time for yourself, just to put your thoughts down on paper, to get organized and all of that. I see that Alex has said recommending at least 2 weeks. I think that's a great recommendation. So, we don't expect you to pour time and hours and a lot of effort over the next 2 months or, however much longer we have until the deadline. But if you're in a pinch, you can submit it in a short amount of time. You all have a step up if you're already watching this this webinar. So definitely get started. Our recommendation is always to get started sooner rather than later. Oh, a great question here about optional questions. And if, not answering an optional question could be counted against you, absolutely not. Some of these optional questions are not applicable to every student. One of them, I think, particularly in our creative essays section of the application, there's a question that asks, like, is there anything that you might want to share? You don't have to share anything else if the application and the questions in the application already get you to talk about whatever you think the judges need to see and hear. So it's totally, when we say optional, that really means optional. You do not have to feel forced to write anything down. And often if you feel like you have to force yourself to answer something, chances are you're better off not answering that optional question. Oh, a great question here about word limits. And does anything happen basically if you're under or over word limits? So Alex talked about writing concisely, right? Writing underneath the word limit is totally fine. We give a maximum for each question. You don't have to use it. If you answer a question in less words than than is in the word limit, that's perfectly okay. It won't allow you to submit your application if you have responses that go over that word limit. So you will have to stay underneath it. But if you're well underneath it, that's totally okay. Just seeing a lot more questions, about changing the project, and just what that all means. You can still collect data if you don't change anything about your variables. Basically, think about it as conducting more trials, right? So in your research project, you might have conducted 3 trials and presented that data at your regional fair, and maybe you just want to conduct a few more because more data, will back up your claims. Will give you more data, right, to back up your claims. That's totally fine. So you can still do that without changing your research methods, right? You're just doing the same thing. You're just collecting more data of what you've already done. For engineering projects, even if you're not testing on anyone else, you really shouldn't be changing your prototypes at all. Again, think about this as whatever you competed with at your local fair, and what earned you the nomination to compete is what you should be entering into the competition. So again, the only thing you can do is add more data of the same thing to your application. You should not be changing anything about the intent, your prototypes. Yeah, I think I've explained it a few times now. If you have more questions, email us at jic@societyforscience.org, and we'll answer your questions individually. Right. I will just go through and see if there are any other questions. You will be able to refer to this video later on. We're going to post the recording. I think by tomorrow morning it should be back up. It'll be in the application and under the resources tab as well. So you'll definitely be able to see this. If you haven't received a digital nominee packet from your science fair, email us. We can send you the link to that as well so that you have it. All right. Alex, am I missing anything that you want to call out here?
I don't think so. I think we are pretty good. And yeah, if you have any questions, I am popping the email in the chat right now. And we will pull it up on the screen in just a second. But yeah, feel free to email us. We're happy to answer your questions. That's what we're here for. Anything that didn't get answered here, we're happy to answer it via email.
Awesome. So we recommend, you can take a picture of this slide with your phones or a screenshot. All of these websites, links are available through our website as well. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope you feel a little bit more excited to complete your applications and prepared to do so as well. And again, you should feel so proud of how far you've already come just to make it this far. And, being in the top 10% of middle school students around the country is a huge honor. So we want you to know that you have already done what it takes to keep going. So don't stop now. Complete that application by June 11th, and we hope to see you all as entrants over the summer. So thanks again for joining us, and see you soon. Bye.